The first time they heard the screaming, it came from the woods behind the Miller property. It was a Sunday, early fall, the kind of day where the wind smells like burnt leaves and you can see your breath if you hold still long enough. The church bells had just finished ringing in the town of Grafton Hollow, and most folks were still nursing weak coffee and stronger regrets. 11-year-old Caleb Miller had wandered off again. His parents were used to it. He liked to explore. The boy had a thing for rocks and bugs and tree roots that grew like twisted hands. But that morning, when he didn't come back for lunch, his father grabbed the old Remington and started calling his name through the trees. That's when the screaming started. It was distant at first, faint, like a fox caught in barbed wire, but it kept going. Louder, longer, more human. By the time they found Caleb, he was curled up at the base of a tree with blood on his hands and dirt in his mouth. He wouldn't speak, wouldn't blink, just kept staring at something behind them, past them, into the trees. The sheriff asked him where he'd been. Caleb finally whispered, "In the well." Grafton Hollow didn't have any wells in those woods. Not anymore. Sheriff Daniel Hatch had lived in Grafton Hollow his whole life. He was a quiet man with a bad back and a worse knee, and the kind of memory that didn't let things go. Not even the things everyone else had learned to forget. So when Caleb Miller muttered, "In the well," Hatch didn't ask which one. He knew. He remembered. He had been 16 when the last one went missing. June of '78. A girl named Helen Porter. Hair like straw, voice like a bell. She used to sell lemonade on the corner near the post office. One day she just vanished. People said it was the quarry, or the railroad men, or she'd run off with that boy from Renton who wore leather jackets and carried a knife for no reason. But Daniel remembered the footprints they found in the woods. Small ones, leading toward the old clearing, and never leading back. His daddy, sheriff back then, had gone into those woods with a shovel and a jug of whiskey and come back pale and soaked in sweat. He told Daniel to never go past the Miller line. Said the ground there was soft for a reason. They called it a sinkhole. They boarded it up, poured concrete, built a fence. The fence rotted. The concrete cracked. The woods grew back over it, fast and greedy, like they wanted it hidden. By the time Daniel was sworn in, people had stopped talking about the well altogether. Newer generations didn't even know it was there. But Daniel knew. And now Caleb Miller knew too. The boy had been sedated and taken to Grafton General. His parents were still shaking when Daniel spoke to them. His mother kept repeating that she could smell something on him. Something sweet and rotted, like wet moss and spoiled sugar. His fingernails were packed with black dirt. His eyes, when he did open them, never stopped darting to the corners of the room. Daniel sat with him a while, didn't say much. After an hour, Caleb leaned close and whispered, "It talks from the bottom, real quiet, but it knows your name." Sheriff Hatch didn't tell anyone he was going. He didn't sign anything out of the station, didn't take a deputy, just gassed up the truck, grabbed the flashlight that still worked when it felt like it, and drove out past the town limits before the sun was up. The trees greeted him like they remembered, tall, watching, still. He parked by the old Miller fence line. The gate was open. The padlock lay rusted in the grass, split clean down the middle like it had been pried apart with fingers too strong for the body they belonged to. The grass was damp, not with dew, with something darker. He followed the path he hadn't walked in 4 decades. The trees closed in quickly, a tunnel of pine and shadow. No birds, no wind, just that low, steady pressure in the chest you feel when something old is awake and waiting. And then he saw it. The clearing. It was exactly the same, and completely different. The boards were gone. The concrete was shattered and scattered like broken teeth. The earth in the center of the clearing had slumped into itself, a sagging depression maybe 6 feet wide, ringed with old bricks and creeping moss. The well had opened again. Daniel stood at the edge. The flashlight flickered. He aimed it downward. The beam barely touched the sides. Slick stone, wet and black. Something moved far below, just outside the reach of light. Not fast, not slow, just turning. He swallowed. His mouth was dry. His legs felt heavier than they should have. Then he heard it. A sound rising from below. Not wind, not water. A voice, faint, familiar, said his name. Daniel. He stepped back. His boot landed on something soft. He turned. A shoe. Small. Child-sized. Half buried in the dirt. It was Caleb's. Still tied. Still warm. Daniel looked back at the well. The voice spoke again. He's not yours anymore. Sheriff Hatch didn't tell anyone he'd found the well open again. He didn't log it. Didn't make a report. Hell, he barely slept. The next morning, he was back with a shovel, 3 bags of quicklime, and a gallon of diesel fuel. He stood at the edge of the clearing, sleeves rolled up, the same way his father had all those years ago. His knees hurt, his back ached, but something deeper inside him hurt worse. He didn't know if Caleb was still alive, but he knew what would happen if he didn't try. The well was deeper than he remembered. He poured in the lime first, white clouds puffing up, burning the back of his throat. Then came the diesel. It soaked the bricks, sank into the dark. He struck a match, paused. Somewhere below he heard movement, shifting stone, wet cloth, breath. He threw the match. The flames didn't roar. They hissed, like something down there was thirsty. He kept feeding it. Branches, oil, a tire he'd found in the ditch. The fire burned for an hour, then went out. Black smoke hung low over the clearing. The trees around the well seemed darker, almost scorched, but the fire hadn't touched them. Daniel took the shovel and started filling it in. Dirt, stones, logs, anything he could find. He worked until dusk, until his hands bled and his arms shook. When he finished, he stood over the mound and waited. Nothing happened. No sound. No whisper. Just the stillness. He walked back to the truck, drove home, drank half a bottle of whiskey and collapsed into bed with his boots still on. That night, he dreamed of the woods, of a voice singing beneath the earth, of children, hair wet with moss, crawling out of holes in the trees, and of his father, digging, digging, digging. 3 days later, another child disappeared. Her name was Emily Finch, 9 years old. Last seen riding her pink bicycle down Marrow Creek Road just before sundown. She waved at her neighbor, turned the corner, and never came home. The bicycle was found the next morning, abandoned near the edge of the woods, tires still spinning. Daniel got the call just after sunrise. He didn't say anything when they told him, just stood there, jaw clenched, one hand on the brim of his hat. The deputies thought he was going into shock, but the truth was worse. He wasn't surprised. He drove out alone. Again, the woods were waiting. The path to the clearing had widened. More trees bent outward now, like something had pushed through them recently. The air was heavier. The sky above looked the same, but the light somehow didn't reach the forest floor. Daniel's boots sank deeper into the earth with every step. He reached the well. It was open again. Everything he'd poured in, the dirt, the stones, the burned remains, was gone. Cleared out, like a throat that had coughed itself clean. Something had climbed up from below and taken Emily. Daniel dropped to his knees. He didn't cry. Not exactly. He just stared into that endless hole and felt time peel back around him. The world narrowed to the stone lip of the well and the black behind it. He felt like a boy again, barefoot, muddy, standing behind his father with a shovel in one hand and a lie in the other. The wind stirred behind him. Branches cracked. A sound like many feet, small feet, moving fast. He turned. Nothing, just woods. But he knew what he'd heard. From the well came a voice, high-pitched, twisting. Emily's singing now. Then laughter, light, innocent, wrong. Daniel staggered to his feet and ran. He didn't stop until the trees thinned and the road opened up before him. Gravel loose under his tires as he peeled away from the past and the thing waiting in the dirt. The town changed after Emily vanished. Not all at once. Not in ways outsiders might notice. But Grafton Hollow had always had a rhythm. A small-town heartbeat, quiet and steady. Morning routines, evening greetings, porch lights that clicked on at the same time every night. But now things were off. People walked faster, even when there was nowhere to be. Conversations trailed off mid-sentence. Doors stayed locked, curtains stayed drawn, and the woods, no one went near them, not even the dogs. At night, the air grew thick with the scent of mildew and wet ash. Some said it was the creek. Others said the wind had shifted. But Daniel knew better. Something was breathing again. At the diner, old men stopped playing checkers. They stared at the trees instead, saying nothing. Children who'd once played near the fence lines now refused to go outside. Some had night terrors. Others drew pictures of holes in the ground filled with teeth. The pastor held a prayer vigil. No one came. That week, 2 more families packed up and left town. Quietly, no goodbyes. One of them left a note nailed to the church door. We know it's awake, and it knows our names. Daniel spent his nights walking the perimeter of the woods with a shotgun and a flashlight that flickered even with new batteries. He left salt lines along the Miller fence, whispered old prayers he barely believed in anymore. It didn't matter. The voices were growing bolder. Sometimes they called to him from across the fields, from under porches, from storm drains. And once, from the phone line at the station, he answered a call and heard only the sound of digging. He kept a bottle of whiskey in his drawer now. Didn't help much. One night, he found a drawing on his windshield. A child's sketch in red crayon. A well surrounded by stick figures. All of them had open mouths. One figure was taller, labeled you. Daniel Hatch wasn't a brave man. He wasn't a hero. He was tired, pushing 60, and hadn't run more than 100 feet in over a decade. But he knew the rhythm of evil when he felt it, the slow, steady pulsing of something patient, something hungry. And he knew this. If he didn't try to stop it, no one else would. He couldn't rely on the state police. They barely came through town anymore. Couldn't talk to the mayor. She'd stopped answering calls. The town had already decided, in its bones, that it would rather forget than fight. So he planned alone. And it started with the trap. Daniel knew that the well didn't want just anyone. It wanted the lonely, the forgotten, the small. But more than anything, it wanted the curious. So he gave it one. He found a girl, a runaway from the next county over, sleeping behind a gas station. 15 maybe, thin, sharp eyes. Said her name was Wren. Said she didn't believe in ghosts. He told her he needed her help with something old and strange in the woods. Told her she'd be safe and paid her cash up front. She laughed in his face and said, "I'm not scared of trees." That made her perfect. He gave her the rules. Don't step into the circle. Don't say your name out loud. And if it whispers to you, don't answer back. That night, they walked to the clearing. The well was already open. The woods were humming. Not loud, but steady, like a low drone deep in the earth. Wren stood at the edge of the clearing, staring down into the dark, chewing gum like it was just another night. "So this is it?" she asked. Daniel nodded, shotgun at his side. "It'll come when it's ready." They waited. Nothing. Then a breeze. The smell hit them first, like rotting leaves and burnt feathers. And the voice came next. "We see you." Ren stiffened, looked back at him. Daniel whispered, "Don't talk. Don't move." But the ground beneath her began to shift, just slightly, as if the soil had taken a breath. The air turned electric. The well groaned, and then a hand, long, wet, black as coal, fingers thin as wires. It reached up over the rim, followed by another. The thing pulled itself from the well like it had done it 100 times before. Not fast, not slow, just certain, deliberate. It wasn't a person. That was the first thing Ren said later, when she could finally talk again. It wasn't a person. It was like a coat made of shadows with teeth where the buttons should be. Daniel saw it too. It had the shape of a man, but none of the substance. A face, but not one made for looking at. Just a smudge where features should have been, and pale flickers where the eyes might have once burned. He didn't fire. He wanted to. His fingers were on the trigger, but something in his brain told him if he pulled it, he wouldn't hit the creature, he'd shoot himself. So he did nothing. Ren backed away, slowly, tears on her cheeks. Not fear, not yet, just awe. The thing stepped past her, walked toward Daniel, stopped 5 feet away, and smiled, or did something like it. Then it opened its mouth, not to speak, but to show him. Inside, behind the black gums and twisted rows of yellowed teeth, were voices. He could hear them, children, dozens, crying, laughing, screaming, and one voice louder than the rest. His father's. "We always fed it what it wanted. You just made it hungrier." The thing reached out, touched Daniel's chest, and something inside him broke. A dam. A wall. Memory poured out. Guilt. Every unsolved case. Every missing child. Every look of despair he'd turned away from. It all came rushing back like ice in the veins. He collapsed. When Daniel came to, the thing was gone. So was Ren. The clearing was silent. The well was sealed again. Sealed with earth, with stone, with something darker than either. But not by his hand. The woods around him looked unchanged. But he had changed. He stood slowly, knees screaming, heart hammering against cracked ribs. His shirt was soaked with sweat, or maybe blood. It didn't matter. He was alone again, and this time it was worse. He didn't go back to town. Not right away. He walked the edge of the trees for hours, maybe days, unsure if the birds were real or if the sky was watching. When he finally drove back to Grafton Hollow, people didn't ask where he'd been. They knew. They always knew. He handed in his badge the next morning. Said nothing. Just left it on the desk, next to a map with a single black circle around the woods. He didn't tell them the well was closed again. He didn't believe it himself, because deep down, he understood something he hadn't wanted to admit. You don't bury the well. The well buries you. The children's names would keep coming. The trees would always grow back. The earth would open when it was ready. And somewhere, far beneath the roots, it would whisper again. He sleeps in a cabin now, just past the old quarry road. No neighbors, no phone, just salt lines, a shotgun, and a pile of journals he refuses to burn. He leaves a bowl of water out every night, and sometimes he hears something lapping at it. Not a dog, not a raccoon, something with fingernails. He doesn't look, he doesn't speak, but he listens, because someday soon it will say his name again. And this time, he will answer.